All right. Hey everyone, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And I am here today for our weekly YouTube/Facebook Live on Thursday afternoons. So welcome. I'm glad that you are here to join me. And as you can see, I have Diane Evans on screen with me today. Diane is the owner and creator of PhotoFluent, and we're going to meet her a little bit more in depth shortly. But I wanted to welcome everybody here, give everybody a chance to kind of find us through YouTube and find us on Facebook. And if you're coming in, if you don't mind just dropping a comment in the comment, Kelly's already on it, where you're watching from, that lets me know you can see us. It lets me know that everything's going well. Plus, it's really fun. And Diane might have fun seeing where all of my viewers come from. And if it's your first time here watching, this is I tend to be very casual, so feel free to ask questions in the comments. We will absolutely answer the questions as we go along. And, I want to make sure everybody gets those questions answered. So, hey, Kelly is from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I am in my office in North Carolina. How about you, Diane? Where are you located at?
I'm in Sacramento.
Sacramento, California. So we are miles apart. Oh, wow. And Dave is here again from Renton. Hey, Dave. Michelle's here from Oklahoma. Mary Jane. Hey, back from Pennsylvania. Danya. Oh, you guys know the thing because you guys are here every week. Hey, Danya from Georgia. Talent on board. I love that name, guys. From Las Vegas. Gene, Michigan. We have Teresa from Kansas and Flo from Oregon and Lori from Southern California. Hey, Nicole from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yes, welcome, guys. I'm really excited that you guys are here. As you know, if you are watching this on a replay, just so you know, I will have all the links, particularly in YouTube, in the description below the video because the comments don't go over. So any link that I mention of putting in the comments, if you are watching on YouTube at a later date, they will be in the description below. On Facebook, you'll find them you'll find them in the comments because those do go over. Just kind of a quirky thing of the platform that I use, guys. So anyway, okay, things flying by. If you have a question that you ask and I do not acknowledge it or mention it, it probably means that as so many comments come in at one time, sometimes I lose things in the feed. Just pop it in again. We definitely are not ignoring you. I probably just got out of my view before I could catch it. So feel free to do that. I am going to go ahead and put in this week's blog post into the chat so you guys can see that. This week's blog post, I am so excited. Diane wrote this for me. Diane is, as I said, the creator and the owner of PhotoFluent, and Diane and I met actually in a mastermind group, basically. And she's a photographer, and of course, being the genealogist that I am, on the surface, you wouldn't necessarily think that we had anything in common or that we would have be able to collaborate together. But as soon as I heard her talking, I said, Diane, we have to talk after this. We have to collaborate. And Diane was like, what? But at the end of the day, she's a photographer. I'm a genealogist. We're storytellers. And that's really, I think, what drew us together. Don't you think, Diane?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we are here. So I asked her to write us a blog post about taking photographs in the cemetery. And the reason I wanted her to do this is because you guys know I spent a lot of time in the cemetery. I was just in the cemetery yesterday. But what happens is hang on, I had something dinging. Let me turn that off here. I can take photographs of that gravestone, but I cannot guarantee you that I'm going to actually be able to read that stone when I get back home and really look at those photographs because I'm just not that skilled at it. And so I really wanted Diane, I said, do you have ideas? Do you have tips? And she's like, oh yeah. So we have Diane today and we are going to chat about taking those cemetery photos so that we can get a good picture of them, tell the story, and really move our research forward. So yes, that's what we are here for today. So welcome, Diane. Thank you so much for being here. And can you tell us a little bit about just really your background in photography and how you got started?
I'll do the short version because I don't think you want that to take the whole session. I actually have worked in healthcare for most of my life, but photography was a real passion, and I've been studying it now for 20 years. And the last couple of years, I decided I really want to do this for a living. And as much as I love photography, I also love teaching photography. So just last year, I was brainstorming with some friends, and PhotoFluent was born. And that's where I teach travelers specifically how to create photos that they love, kind of get past the technical overwhelm, because I struggled with that, so I get it, and connect with your creativity, even if you think you're not creative, because you are, and really tell the story. That's a huge part of how I photograph, and especially when you travel, when you're traveling to cemeteries, it's, to me, about telling the story of your adventure. So that's kind of how PhotoFluent was born.
Oh, I think that's a great way to do that. And, you know, I love the short version because, again, it's like a genealogist. If you ask us where we're from, you kind of have to be a little specific, because when you ask a genealogist where they're from, it's like, how long do you have? As you can imagine. So before we get diving into really talking about the photos themselves, guys, I do have a few announcements from for Are You My Cousin? Just want to give you a reminder. I know Thanksgiving is next week. We are heading into the holiday season. So there is no Facebook Live next Thursday, because it is Thanksgiving. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, but we will resume the following week. If you are ready to start doing your shopping, guys, I do have the gift guide on the website. So you can head over and just search gift guides on the website, and you will find you'll find quite a few gift guides over there. Everything from just the whole big gift guides to just the stocking stuffers. So feel free to head over there and check that out. And those of you who are on the Frugal Genealogy email list, who get those about the sales that are coming up each week, I'll have a email coming out tomorrow, but then I will send one probably next Wednesday. You'll get one too. So you're going to kind of get one a little bit early, two kind of close together, just so that I can finish capturing all of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales that come out that I can let you guys know about. So I just wanted you to be aware to watch for those as well. So that's what I have here at Are You My Cousin? So Diane, let's talk cemeteries. Where did you go to take those photographs?
In Sacramento, we have a historic cemetery, really not that far from my house, probably within a mile. So that's where I went, to the historic cemetery here in Sacramento.
It's beautiful. I mean, I could tell that it had a lot of the historic.
Yeah, it really does.
Things there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. Had you ever really studied the tombstones as far as a photographer? Had you ever kind of gone at it from this angle of telling the story through your photos of a cemetery before?
No, I'm fascinated with cemeteries. I could wander around and look at the tombstones, and the faded print that you can barely read. And I'm fascinated with cemeteries, as I'm sure many of your listeners are. It's not unusual.
Are you sure you're not a genealogist? That's what I have to ask.
I've never researched my own genealogy, but like abandoned houses, where you can see that other people have lived or been there for years. When I find stuff in a house I bought from the previous owners, I'm really fascinated with history of other people who've gone before us, I guess. So yeah, I love cemeteries, but I photographed them like in Santa Fe or Taos. I was there on a trip and there was a cemetery, and I made some photographs, but I never specifically went out before to do a cemetery. So this was incredibly fun.
See, we have now converted you. We have now converted you. Well, I love how you started the post. You were talking about taking a picture of all the signs, and I've talked with folks I've written about that as well. But you had a little bit of a different take on it, or better, actually, just a better technique certainly than I did with taking a picture of all of the signs. And what types of signs, you have to remind me, did you see, and all the different types that you were seeing when you were there?
The Sacramento Historic Cemetery is really large, and they do tours and everything. So it's a pretty big cemetery, and they have, I think it's part of the story, and it's partly to help me remember later. So some of the signs become part of the images that I want to gather together to share, that tell the story. And part of them are just to remind me of where I was in the details of it. So I think it's a great thing, a great tool to use, the kind of the overview of what cemetery you're in, because you think, oh, I'll remember that. And then we don't always.
Right.
We only can fit so much in our brains, I guess. And then signs in our cemetery, they also had like maps and where certain, because there's famous people buried there, where those particular graves are. And then I made some photos of a particularly kind of famous grave of a little girl who, I don't remember the whole story, but she died young, and her mother had gathered her favorite things in a box and put them under the stairwell. And then I think in the 80s, maybe someone bought the house and found that box.
Oh, wow.
And so they put some of those things out on the gravestone, and it became kind of a famous story. And so now people continue to put things that she liked, little toys and pencils. And so I took a picture of that story on a sign, because I thought I'll never remember the details of that. So really, anything that's written that you want to remember, make a photo of it.
And that's a good point. You know, a lot of times I'll just, in the past, I've been, I guess, guilty, for lack of a better word. You know, I'll take a picture, I just kind of snap a picture, but I'm not necessarily worried about the quality of that picture, of that sign. But, you know, it sounds like I need to be a little more cognizant of that. I'm usually doing it more for, you know, if there's a phone number, like for the cemetery office or something like that. But I think what you're saying is, you know, they can be part of the story, not just that reminder, or not just that used as that research tool. They can be a little bit more.
Yeah. I kind of approach every photo like just in case I want to use it later. So I try to frame it. I try to look at how it is centered in the frame, what's around it, and make sure it's in focus. Because I've taken photos of signs before that I can't read because they're not in focus, and that's not good.
I've got a few of those in my collection. So I like, one of the things that you said that you like to do is to do like, and I like to do this from a research perspective, is to take a photo of like if it's a large cemetery, like of the entire area, or it may be several photos, but they tend to look really flat and kind of just like they all look alike after a while. And you brought up the point about the tip. Share with us about the tip that you had about when you're taking those larger sweeping views and what makes them better and more memorable.
I think that it's one of the hardest shots, whether it's a beautiful landscape or the entire cemetery, because you want to set the context of the cemetery. You want to get the whole picture, the entirety of where you are. And you think you just take a picture of the cemetery. But when the viewer, and that could be you or someone you're sharing it with, looks at it later, there's so much going on, it's busy, and the eye doesn't really know where to go, doesn't know where to start, doesn't know what to look at because there's too much going on. So there's some ways to kind of get the whole picture, but lead the eye. It's like you're the little tour guide of the person looking at your photo and taking them through the photo. And you can do that with lighting, although you don't have control over lighting in a cemetery. You can kind of move your body around and just pay attention to what's lit. So if there's a particular entrance, gate that's going to be the focus of your photo. And I think that's the key, is make sure you still have a focus. So even if it's the whole cemetery, maybe the entrance gate is the focus, or maybe there is a particular tombstone or grave marker that you're emphasizing and you want that to be the place to start with the viewer's eye. You maybe put that in the lower left-hand corner, or squat down so that's in a position where it's more prominent. That way, when you look at it later, even though there's all this stuff going on, the viewer still looks at that marker first, or that gate first, or the house. You know, sometimes they have little caretakers' houses or caretakers' buildings. You just want to kind of position so that there's a focus. Leading lines is another thing that I love. If there's a path, that is a very obvious way to just lead your viewer right through the photograph, is to position the path so that it's kind of at the beginning of your photo, and it leads you right through the rest of the cemetery.
I love what you said about being kind of the tour guide. I think one of the mistakes, I know it's a mistake that I've made. I know, and I think it's one that a fairly common one is as genealogy researchers, whether we're researching in a record or whether we're on site, like at a grave, at a cemetery, we tend to be a little quick and not pick up on all the details. And so I like to tell people there's a well-known genealogy researcher, Mark Lowe, who researches, he's in Tennessee and researches a lot of Southern research. And he says, you got to set a spell. no, he says, you got to mull and ponder. You got to mull and ponder.
Yes.
And when you're in the records, because I think sometimes we are too quick to, as I say, grab our ancestors and run. But I think, if, it's tempting. You get to that, and you're like, oh, there it is. And you just, run over there to it. But I think at that point, we do need to be cognizant and back up. Maybe once we've gotten over that excitement, once we've done the run through, and grabbed it, but to back up and think, okay, how do I tell this story? I have this information. What else can I find in that cemetery? But how can I tell the story so that, one, I remember, but two, I can share that and bring others into this as well. Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to be honest, my family gets a little creeped out when it comes to cemetery photos. But I've converted my husband, so he goes with me. But so there is that, but there is that beauty, and I think that leads into what you had to say too. That the photographs will portray feelings, and you can actually convey that through your photographs, which really does build that connection, not only for you as the photographer and you as the researcher, but you as the family member, as you're sharing these with family and sharing the stories. I think it's an amazing, I loved what you said about that it conveys feelings, because it absolutely does. So yes, I really enjoyed that part of it. How do you, when you're taking those photographs for feelings, what are you looking for to kind of convey in those photos?
It's funny you mentioned, I think you said the reference you mentioned said mull and ponder. Mm-hmm. I'd say be mindful and intentional. So kind of the same thing, just different words, but
mull and ponder is a Southern version of that.
Yes, that's the Southern version. Yeah. I think it's really important to take a breath and be mindful of what you're experiencing. Because like you said, we rush through, and I get excited, and think, oh my gosh, this is cool. And I run around, and I have to take a breath and kind of stop, sit, just relax and take it all in and pay attention to what's going on inside you, that whole mindful part. Mm-hmm. You mentioned, Lisa, like a cemetery near where you lived, and it's not all that well kept, but there's one particular family plot that is mm-hmm. well kept. And so when you look at that, you think, how do you feel? Does it feel like kind of warm and they're well cared for and someone pays attention to that and loves them, and on the other hand, you look at the other areas and it feels a little lonely, maybe sad. So when you feel that, you don't always think, okay, I feel sad, I want my photo to look sad. But if you're paying attention to what's going on and you hold your camera up and start to make photos with that and you're intentional, mm-hmm. they'll portray that. And especially if you think, I see a difference between these two areas, I want the two areas in the same photo. And then I want to really focus in on the clean area. Mm-hmm. Then I want to focus on the unkept area so that you can have all three kind of comparison shots.
That's a great point. And as a researcher, what I'm seeing and what I would take, the feelings that I would take, and the photos, the way you described that would absolutely capture this. Because the what we were talking about beforehand, before we started videoing, was that it's actually a family plot, and this family mm-hmm. plot was very well kept. The grass was mown. There were no fire ants in that particular family plot, but the cemetery had lots of fire ants mm-hmm. mounds, and so it was very well kept. And so, as a researcher, what that tells me, I'm seeing that as a family plot that is well tended. People remember, mm-hmm. and the stones really ranged. It was very obvious. You had the much older stone, 2 or 3 stones in there that were, probably the patriarch of the family. Then you had some more modern stones kind of moving through history. And what that tells me is this family valued family. They valued the generations, and they, valued the memories. And as a researcher, I want to know if I'm researching that family, I want to know who is keeping that site up, because they probably know more information from a genealogy standpoint and family history standpoint as well. So it tells me, it gives me clues, and it actually gives me another piece to add to my research plan to move my research forward. It's definitely an out of the box thing. You got to think about, again, just what is it telling me? It's not like, oh, well, that one's nice. That one's nice. It's easier to walk around. It's prettier. There's so much more that what that was telling me as a researcher too. So, but I love to be able to, I would never have thought to take a picture of it in relationship to, say, the lesser kept up areas to really show that dichotomy there. So now I got to go back. I might have to go back now. So one of the things too that you talked about, and I was trying to play around with this yesterday when I was in cemetery, but I don't have a fancy camera. I just use my cell phone. And you had talked about aperture and like the f4 setting on the cell phone. I'm sure a lot of my readers and viewers use cell phones primarily as opposed to the bigger, fancier cameras. Is there a way we were kind of talking about ways to possibly get that type of depth, or is that what, I don't even know if I'm using the right words, Diane.
Depth of field. Yeah.
So tell us a couple ideas that you had about that and using different modes on the cell phone.
So what I talked about in the blog post is a shallow depth of field, because when you get the entire photo, you generally want to get everything in focus because you're trying to tell the story of the whole place. But when you really start to focus in on the details, and you still might want some context around it, how do you get that viewer again to go right to the detail first? Well, shallow depth of field is one way to do that. And that just means that what you're focusing on is in focus and everything else is a little soft and blurry. So our eyes tend to look at what's lit and what's in focus first. It's just how our brains think. So when you do a shallow depth of field of like f4 and you're on the print of that stone, but you still have some other stones in the background, you're going to look right at that print first. But if you're using a cell phone, you can't adjust aperture, but you sometimes can choose portrait mode, and that does a similar effect. It's kind of faking aperture, shallow depth of field or aperture on a real camera. It does it pretty well. Some of the phones are really good at it. Like the new Apple has different little cameras in there. And so some, I don't know how exactly the technology works, but I've seen some just fake blur the background. Either way, if you have, and I think you said your phone doesn't have portrait, but it has food.
It has a food mode, yes, which
yeah.
When I went into it, looks kind of like that portrait mode that you're describing.
Yeah, and so it does the same effect. It's not perfect because it is kind of, like I said, faking it, and it does some technology to blur the background, but it still gives you that emphasis on that one subject, and that's kind of what you're looking for.
And that's the goal, is
that's the goal.
Subject, definitely. So yeah. All right, guys. So I actually took a couple photographs yesterday. I was going to let Diane look at, so I was like, oh, to give me pointers and to tell what I did wrong on these photographs. So I'm going to share my screen, guys, and pull that up for us real quick here. So let me do that. I tell you what, let's see. Let me go here. I'm getting better at this, guys. I promise. I used to really struggle with how I did this. Okay, here we go. Hang on, it's coming, guys. I promise. There we go. Can you see that okay, Diane?
Yes.
Okay. So the story, okay, so this is taken, this was just a photograph I wanted to take around with. It was a very sunny day, as you can tell. I did struggle a little bit with shadows and having to where to put myself, so I didn't have my shadow on top of this stone, but have at it. It's a little tiny stone. It's well worn, obviously, and really, I honestly cannot read the entire thing.
So one of my suggestions would be and maybe you already have these photos. What you said, it's a very tiny stone, but I can't tell that. So if you want to show that it's a tiny stone, it needs to have a little perspective, like stand back and maybe get something around it, another stone, or something that gives the illusion that it is small, because being that close, you can't really tell. It's almost like you're not close enough to get that super close-up shot, but you're a little, you're a little too far away to get the super close-up shot, but you're not quite close enough to really get in there on the details. So I mentioned getting really close. There's a famous photographer who, of course, I can't think of his name right now, but he said, if you don't like your photos, you're not close enough. And always get closer. So I would say get closer, but you're also limited by your equipment. So you can get 2 inches away, but your camera or your phone can't always focus when you're that close, because just the technology won't allow it. So get as close as you can that your phone or your camera will still let you focus. And that might even be splitting this up into 2. Like I would say, if you can't read the print, you want to get closer and really fill the entire frame with just the print on that stone.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and so yes, that makes sense. So let me see. I think I might have. Nope. Okay, guys, I shouldn't be doing that, should I? There we go. Okay, so that was the other one I took of that one. So that one that I had just showed was the close up, and I guess this was more the setting of it. Yep. I was trying to show kind of where in relationship it was to the other stones, I guess.
Okay, and I really like this one a lot, Lisa, because it clearly brings my eye right to this stone. It's lit. There's shadow on the right side, but shadows aren't bad. Shadows are also part of the story. They give depth. So the front of the stone is lit, and that helps bring your eye there. And it's the way it's positioned. It's very obviously the subject. And now you have the rest of the cemetery kind of fading off behind it. So I think it's a really lovely. I like the angle of it too. I think we tend to stand straight in front of everything. And I love the angle of this, so that the point is kind of coming right to your lens.
I'd like to say that I planned that, but I was trying to get away from the shadows. So,
I know.
And I was trying to show too, as you can see, this stone is actually off its base a little bit. That was the other piece I was trying to capture on that, just so that I would remember that piece of it. So yeah. Oh, that is so cool. Okay. So all hope is not lost for me.
Oh, no. Well, and the other thing is, all of us, even professional photographers, take hundreds of pictures to get the few that we like. So I think we're so hard on ourselves, and we look at our photos and we always compare them to everyone else. But the more photos you take, the more you'll end up that you like. So take the angle, take the straightforward, take another angle, just try all different sides, and then you'll end up with some that you like.
Yes, that's a good point. I was just noticing, even in this one, I actually can read this a little bit better. Just there's this, I think it turned out to be Weatherspoon, if I remember correctly now, but I'm like, I can actually start to see that there, that I wasn't seeing when it was that more straight on shot, actually.
You know what would be an interesting shot here is to get really close, but at the angle, so right at that corner, so that you have the print coming across and you get right there. Sometimes if you get at an angle, and depending on how the light hits it, it really picks up the texture, like that bright light, the way it hits the stone emphasizes the texture. So it might give you a better ability to read it in the photo than if you go straight on, because sometimes if the light is just right, it just flattens out the whole photo.
Right. And you bring up a good point. Here, I'll come back where we can see each other. So you bring up a really good point, because one of the things that's a concern sometimes is we don't want to damage old stones, because they can be very fragile. And you hear about people going and doing like rubbings and things on those. Well, that's actually can be quite damaging. But if we take that time to play around and play with the light, and get close enough, and we can actually get a better reading on that stone without even having to touch the stone, and certainly not damage it. So it is, I think it's definitely a way to preserve the stones as well. So yeah, which I hadn't even really thought of as much. So yeah, I got to get back on now. Now I'm like, okay, my camera's right here. I do have not that cemetery. There's a cemetery just down the street. If I'm not here later, you know where I am. Cindy says she now wants to go on a field trip to a local cemetery. I know.
Nice.
I love going to this. I don't even have to have anybody related to me in the cemetery to go and just enjoy. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but enjoy.
No, it's not weird.
I know. You're my people. You get it. Danya said the same thing. See, you're not. I know you get it. You're our people here to tell the story. She's liking these tips. I'm glad you do. So Nicole said she'd heard to take a mirror to help with light. I've actually seen that on YouTube, I think. Nicole, you might be the one who shared that with me before. That like using a mirror, like if you have somebody else to stand off to the side if they need to reflect light onto a stone, kind of thing. I guess it does require two people, but
a mirror is one option, and it's a little heavy-handed. It can be a little harsh with the light, the way it reflects. But another option, which I hadn't thought about, but you use them in studios, and it's just a white foam board that you get at a craft store. And they come in kind of sheets, smaller sheets, but you could certainly take the whole sheet if you have another person. But it's white. It's not so reflective as a mirror, so it wouldn't be like this harsh light. But it helps the light bounce. So if you have somebody that can hold it, I've used them outside for portraits before, and certainly portrait photographers use them all the time just to get the light right on the face. You could absolutely use something like that out there.
It's a good idea. Yeah, definitely. Lori said, she said, what's the best time of day to photograph stones?
That's a great question. It kind of depends on the cemetery and what position it's in. I went early morning-ish, like maybe 9 o'clock from my photos. I don't generally plan my itinerary around the sun. So I'm one that kind of rolls with whatever I get. If you really want to see the ideal time, it would be a local cemetery or I guess if you're on vacation and you could be there several times a day, there are apps where you can look it all up. But depending on which part you want to photograph when, because there's different shadows in different times of day. So it's something you would have to research ahead of time and maybe go early in the morning, like sunrise, just past sunrise. There's probably not going to be enough light in general. But an hour after sunrise or so, and then maybe in the evening, and even in the middle of the day, shadows can give you some really cool designs or interesting patterns. So shadows can be your friend, and they can be an element in your photos. So it would just take a little research to see what part of the cemetery you wanted to photograph and what the shadows and light look like.
Is it better? Actually, I think I know the answer. Is a really bright sunny day more advantageous over an overcast day, or is it really you can use both quite strategically, just given whatever it is you have that day that you're there?
I'm a fan of rolling with what you have because I teach travel photography, and not to like photographers who plan a trip around making photos. I teach to travelers. So to me, if you get fog or overcast days, you make the best of it. And there's some things that are better on overcast day, like the details, because you get great texture and color without that really bright, overpowering sun. So it's a great time to get close and get the details. The clouds act as a filter, so you don't have the real contrasty problem that you have when there's bright sun and dark shadows. But like I said, dark shadows can make some good patterns and be an interesting component of your photos. If you live close and you can plan around it, I think, like you said, Lisa, both can add their own elements and make interesting photos. So go when it's both.
Yeah. And I love to be outside. Stephanie says she takes foil and paintbrush to help with reading of the stones, but it's difficult on a windy day. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I try to do everything I can to keep from touching the stone because, some of them, particularly the older ones, because they do tend to be so fragile. But Danya said, can she get information taking photos in the cemetery that have the nameplate on the ground and that they don't have the headstones? That's a good question. So a lot of times we find just the embedded one in the ground. Anything different that you do, or just is it still the same tips?
I think top down, that you get right over the top of it and look down on it and still think about how you're framing it. So, you're holding your camera and looking at it. And you can only do what you can do as far as your height, unless you have a ladder or something that you can really get up there. But then I would also even lay on the ground so that you can possibly get the plate like in context, on the ground. So you're looking down at it. That's the best way to see it. But if there's any height to it at all, you can get other aspects. It's kind of about being creative. And again, taking that breath and thinking, okay, how can I show this in different aspects? How can I move my feet? How can I lay down? How can I stand up? How can I move my body in relation to this and capture different perspectives?
I never thought about laying down, because you said that when you're like, get the top down. I thought, I'm like, but I always get my feet. I never thought to lay. Okay. Yes. I wasn't thinking outside the box enough, because I never thought, well, if I lay down, I won't get my feet. So that's a good.
Yeah. I've been in some really awkward positions where I'm like squat and my legs spread and I'm doing this very strange things that, I don't worry about it anymore. If people see me, they see me. But yes, the top down is tough to get your feet moved out of the way.
It's funny you said you don't worry about when people see you. I know my husband's going, why are you smiling in this? I'm like taking selfies in the cemetery. And he goes, you shouldn't be doing that. I get it. They're my people. They'll get it. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Listen, Diana also, she mentioned in the post, she had a freebie. So let me pop that link into the, it's on it's about camera settings and understanding those. So I want to drop that into the link here, guys. And again, if you're watching this on replay in YouTube, it will be in the description below. So that's, let me see, camera settings handout. Cannot type when people are looking. And Stephanie was saying that she photographed one monument in a cemetery multiple times, and the only time it came out readable was when it was wet from rain. Yes, I noticed that when it was drying off. So the next time, and she went to when it was drizzling and got a decent picture. Yeah, definitely water. Sometimes with these super, super old ones, it's really hard to. The water helps. I've heard people will take spray bottles and spray water on it sometimes to get one with that as well. So yes. Oh, we have lots of people who love doing these cemetery photos. I had one recently. I don't think I have this. Let me see if I have it up. I don't think I do. I think it's still on my camera. It is. That I took a picture of, and I thought, it was one of those. The shot is not great. It's readable enough, but it's an old one. I mean, it's from the early 1800s. And it was an old family cemetery in the woods. And it's well kept up, but it's a like 200-year-old cemetery. And the graves are so sunken down that I really couldn't get close. I mean, I didn't want to break an ankle for one, but it's one of those. I'm like, oh, this is the time when I wish I had a better zoom type thing, because it wasn't safe to get close enough. I mean, I was literally afraid that this thing, if I stepped, that it would probably collapse under me. And so I thought, okay, let's not do that. At least it's readable. That's all. That's good for now, kind of thing. So I think there's plans for actual restoration, full on restoration on that one. But yeah.
There are a couple editing things you can do after the fact, Lisa. I mentioned them in the post. But clarity, especially, you can touch up that writing or the print that you can't quite read, and sometimes you can pull it out a little bit afterwards.
That's a good point, changing that. Yeah, and I've done that a lot. I've used just various photo editing things online I think currently I use Vivid Pics. That's what I use, but there are lots of different ones out there I know to use. So Lori said her daughter has a way that someone can see on their phone what the picture looks like that she took just to see if it's a good picture or not. Yeah, I can kind of look at it to see if it's a decent picture or not, but sometimes I get it back and I really, to do what I want with it, I'm like, oh man, maybe it should have been better. So Diane, tell people where they can find you online.
BePhotoFluent.com is my website. And then on Facebook, I'm at PhotoFluent, and Instagram, I'm at PhotoFluent. I think PhotoFluent _ on Instagram, maybe.
Okay, great, great. And I did put your your website in the comments section there too. So anyway, well, guys, thanks so much. Thank you, Diane, for coming on and showing us, and that there's hope for my photography skills.
Absolutely, it was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
It is. I'm ready to head back out to the cemetery to take some more photographs. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. So guys, thanks so much for joining us. And remember, we will not be live next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving, but then the following week we'll be back. So everybody have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.